Welcome to Mindful Escape, the podcast that helps you find your purpose and your passion. My name's Leighton Jewett and I am your host, and today we have Izzy Prior on the show. Izzy started her business at 20 years old, and she talks about the challenges of moving from that corporate world and the adversity with her family and people suggesting that she shouldn't take that entrepreneurial route. She's now 2 years into her business, and she talks about the challenges, the lessons, and some advice that you'll really appreciate. So make sure you're listening closely and we'll jump straight in. Izzy, thank you so much for coming on to Mindful Escape. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leighton. My name's Izzy Prior, and just over 2 years ago, I resigned from my 9-to-5 job in a finance firm and took the leap to start my own social media marketing agency. Over these last 2 years, it has been a rollercoaster journey, and I've now repositioned as a personal branding agency. I now have an employee and I'm scaling my business. It's been an exciting journey and I'm looking forward to telling everyone about it.
Amazing. So let's go to just before you quit your job. What was coming up for you at that time? What were the main triggers that essentially pushed you to start doing this?
Okay, so for context, I've always been a very creative individual, and I wanted to go down the creative path in London, finding a broadcast job, and I was told that I needed more office experience. So I looked on Indeed and applied for quite a few jobs in my local town, and I started at this firm in numbers and currency and finance and investment, and it definitely was not my forte, and it wasn't something I really wanted to go down, but it was that experience. And then the pandemic hit, literally 3 or 4 months into me working there, and the only thing that I could do was just work through the pandemic. I felt very insecure. I think, like many people, you stay in the job that's paying you well and protecting you in such a time of uncertainty. So I ended up staying there for almost 2 years. The January 2021, it got to a point where I was coming home from work severely unhappy and feeling so unfulfilled in my purpose. I was only still at the beginning of my career path, but I was dreading going to work in the morning. I was dreading coming home because it was just the same repeat pattern routine of wake up, work, home, make lunch for tomorrow, go to the gym, see some friends, maybe go to bed. So January came and I actually started looking at online courses for social media marketing, Google ads, paid ads. And I was studying this in my lunch breaks and at home. And I found that interest of mine. And it definitely revealed to me that the job I was working in was coming to an end.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned there it didn't really align with your purpose. Did you know at that point what your purpose was, or what did you have in your mind that you were kind of steering towards?
I wasn't aware of what my purpose was. It wasn't clarified to me, but it felt so wrong to be in this position that I knew that I wasn't following my path. Throughout my school years, college years, I always chose the creative routes. I loved speaking, I loved designing art, I loved writing stories, and it seemed rather a paradox to go into an accountancy job and be sitting behind a desk working on spreadsheets all day. But I chose that path because it's what everyone else told me to do. So I did that, and I think perhaps maybe during the pandemic, I started to recognize through a blog post that I was writing on a food and fitness blog that content creation and the ability to be so creative with food and creating recipes, it started to direct me down that path of creativity again after 2 years of those spreadsheets. So slowly but surely that creativity was coming back.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that that came back, because it's so easy to get caught up in that job, right? And just almost come addicted to that payroll and that lifestyle and the comfort of it all.
100%. I think looking back, if the pandemic didn't happen, there's two ways to look at this. If the pandemic didn't happen, I wouldn't have stayed that job so long. However, if the pandemic didn't happen, I wouldn't have started that food blog and revealed that creative yield that I had. And then I actually wouldn't have started creating content for local businesses around my town. Then I wouldn't have saved money to leave my job, and then I wouldn't have resigned from my job. So the pandemic is a butterfly effect, essentially. I'm really grateful for the pandemic in some ways. Obviously, it caused a great impact that we're still suffering from today in the UK and everywhere.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. It's like could have gone either way, right?
Yeah, I have no idea what would it look like, what life would look like if the pandemic didn't happen.
You mentioned a really interesting point about you took that job because it was what everyone else kind of steered you towards or was suggesting. As you decided that wasn't the path that you wanted to go, how did those people start reacting towards your decisions and your actions ultimately?
Interesting question. So my family are very much in the belief of you go to college, you go to university, get a degree, come away and do job experience, and then work in a 9-to-5 job that pays well, perhaps in London or one of the cities. And when I told some of my family, I remember this very well. We were on a walk in a local country park, and I told them that I'd quit my job, and I think I was about 2 months into my social media business. Some family members expressed a lot, concern. They were quite alarmed by what I was doing because it was so off the path of what they expected of me. Luckily, today it's 2 years down the line, and they are very supportive of me today because they've seen the talent that I have, the creativity I have, the independence that I've grown for myself away from a 9-to-5 role. I've learned a lot about myself in the process of building a business, and I think they're very supportive now. My grandparents support me through the business through and through. But it is interesting how in the beginning, because you didn't go down the route that they did, it appears to be wrong, or you're going to fail. I was very lucky to start my business when I was 20, so I had my family to lie back on if something went wrong, if it failed. I didn't have to be paying rent. I didn't have a child to look after. I wasn't paying a mortgage off or anything like that. So I was in a fortunate position, but it is interesting looking back how regimented and closed, narrow-minded people are because it's what's right for them, and anything else is wrong.
Yeah. And it's such a great point. I love that at your age, I think so many people think I've got to do what my parents say, or I've got to do what society says. I've got to do the comfortable thing and save up money and plan for my future. But you just thought, you know what, now's the time to take that risk. And I 100% agree. I wish I had taken more risks in my 20s. Like that is the time that you can fall back on parents and say, oops, I messed up.
It is interesting. I will add, my mum was extremely supportive from the get-go, but then she was the person that I was coming home to every evening in tears because of the workplace treatment. She was seeing behind the scenes, behind the smile of how unhappy I'd been for the last 1.5 to 2 years in this work job, in this work role. So having her support from the get-go really gave me the confidence that I didn't have in myself. I think I suffered from immense imposter syndrome when I started, and having my mum's support immediately really helped.
One of the things that I've been talking a lot about is fear. How did you get over that fear of just going out on your own and taking a different path?
It's a good question. I think I've always been the sort of person who stands up for themselves and does something a little bit different. I didn't go to university like many of my friends. My entire friendship group, when we split from college, they all went to university, and I chose not to because it didn't align with how I worked, what I wanted to do with my future. I didn't feel like it was the right choice. I had that gut feeling. And I think when I started the business, I still had that fear. And even some friends were like, are you sure you want to do this? And I sort of wanted to prove to myself, after perhaps living in a tight-knit community, having bubble wrap around me my whole life. I wanted to prove to myself, especially, that I could go out there, support myself, market myself, and build something that I would be proud of. And I think that determination and ambition outweighed the fear I had. I always had fear. I'd sit down with my mum when we had dinner in the evening, and I'd be like, I don't know if this is going to go all right. Like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. I did, for the record, have about £10,000 saved from my job to lie back on, in case it came to one of those months where I was earning like 100 quid, because I didn't, for the record, I was charging very low prices because I had that imposter syndrome. But again, having my mum's support there, I'd never had that worry of this is going to fail, or I'm going to be homeless, or anything like that, worst case scenarios.
Yeah, so there's two really good points there that I wouldn't mind just touching on. So one is creating that safety net for yourself, and anyone who's thinking about quitting their job and starting on their own, if they can start saving money now, so they've got something to fall back on, as you say, £10,000, that helps you along that journey. The second thing I wanted to ask you about is starting off. I think most people I've spoken to on this podcast, when they've started off, they've always started with a lower charging amount, right? Until they build that confidence to be able to charge more. If you were to go back in time, would you do the same thing, or do you think you'd have the confidence to just go big?
Okay, so regarding the safety net, I think £10,000 is a substantial amount of money, especially because I didn't have a mortgage to pay. I didn't lease my car or anything, so the outgoings I had was under £1,000 each month. As long as I broke even with that, with the business, then I felt quite secure. But I think in my head, knowing I had a savings of that amount reassured to me that I could spend the first year of my business earning pennies and still have determination to build the next year and not feel stressed or worried about having zero money. I mean, you want to go out the weekend with your friends, you want to go on that girls' holiday, or relax, go to a spa, treat your family to Christmas presents, these sort of things, and having that money made me feel comfortable. So I'd say that for the first thing. I don't necessarily think £10,000, like, you need to have that money, but to reassure yourself, it's definitely helpful to have. And then the second thing, my pricing. So I offered social media management before I repositioned Spark, and I was offering £99 a month to my clients for about 2 posts a week on 2 platforms, let's say Facebook and Instagram, or Facebook and Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. And people were lapping that up in my local town. £99 was so cheap, and I didn't recognize, because I see, you scroll on Facebook and see £99 socials, these sort of things. You see lots of people on Fiverr charging that amount, and I thought it was an all right amount. And then I realized when I hit burnout, I had about 25-30 clients a month. I was creating graphic design for, posting on socials, and I hit burnout bad, severely bad. And I remember giving notice to 9 of my clients in 1 month because I was so stressed about the amount of deliverables I had each week. I didn't understand delegation, hadn't outsourced. I just brought on a graphic designer to help me with some of the work, and I was still charging £99. I think the reason for that was because I didn't go to university, and I haven't done any official certified courses in marketing. So in my head, there was that imposter syndrome, but it was also saying you're not good enough to charge £500 to £1,000 a month for social media management. This is it. This is the starting point. If I were to go back, I definitely would charge a little more, because I was good at graphic design. I've always had that creative flair. I have a great marketing sense. For context, the whole year before, I had that blog post and I was creating ads for Waitrose, Co-op, McCain's Chips, all these company brands that I was creating recipes for. So I knew my target audience, I knew my customer. I very much had that eye and detail. So I wish I charged more, but I wouldn't have gone straight into the £500 to £1,000 region of organic marketing, because I needed to create, I needed to gain testimonials. I needed to create trust with my audience. I had to grow my brand for me. I needed to do that in the beginning. And I don't think I would have got to where I am today without the mistakes that I made in the beginning.
Yeah, that's so good. What would you say from when you first quit your job to where you are now? What's been the biggest challenge so far?
Ooh, okay. Maybe can I say two things here?
Yeah.
So the first thing I'd probably say is that confidence in myself. Nowadays, I work with CEOs and founders of, 6, 7, 8-figure businesses, and they still have imposter syndrome. They still are fearful of, damaging their reputation. They're fearful of certain things, and they tell me that that will always carry through you throughout your whole entrepreneurial career, and you just need to face it. You need to reassure yourself that what you're doing is a great skill. I'm sorry, I've read that wrong, but you have a great skill, and the work that you're doing shows that skill. So I definitely had confidence issues in the beginning. It would show in my sales calls, it would show in the content that I was posting across my social media channels. It would show in my proposals and the way that I spoke to anyone who messaged me on LinkedIn saying I need help. There would be that doubt. You could see it straight through my writing. And I think I wish I told myself to have more confidence, because I knew I had the talent to be able to help these people. But I always limited myself because I didn't go to university, or I didn't have a certain qualification. If I put myself out there more, I think I would be a lot further ahead in my journey. But equally, I'm understanding of the fact that I'm on a journey personally of building myself up and becoming a more confident individual. So that's one thing. And then a more technical thing is I wish I delegated earlier. As I mentioned, I went through that burnout. 2022 was definitely a whole year of burnout. And I made a promise to myself that this year that would change, because when you're doing all of the work yourself, it's not a business. You're just an employee of your own company. And I was determined to start delegating. So in February, I hired my first employee. In January, I brought on a VA. And it has made the business so much more effective in our processes. Our clients are so happy with the work that we're delivering. And I actually have time back in my life to live. I traveled Asia for the last 4 months, and without having a team, I wouldn't have been able to do that. Obviously, I was still working, but delegation was something I definitely wish I brought on years earlier.
Yeah, amazing. Two really good points. Do you have any advice for someone who is lacking in confidence, or anything that they could do, or anything that you did that helped build you up?
Okay, so only recently I've implemented this, but whenever I receive a testimonial or a comment or a message from a client who's very happy with the work that we've been doing, I save that as a screenshot and I save it to a folder in my personal Google Drive, because although in the moment you're like, yeah, I did a great job, I'm happy with that, I'm chuffed, there are days where you will feel that lack of confidence in the work that you're doing, and to go into that folder and have tens if not hundreds of images and comments and documents saved to remind yourself that you are good at your job and you're good at what you're selling. That helps so much. I look at it regularly, and I have quite a lot of pride when I look at it, because I've been able to help transform this many people's distribution channels, or even help them find their purpose in their business and generally in life. That is so rewarding for me. So having that really helps. I think that's the main thing I'd recommend, but also fight the fear. There are so many people out there who are doing something, who are less qualified than you. Me, for example, I didn't go to university. I don't have marketing qualifications, yet I've been able to achieve so much for the clients I work with. There's always going to be someone less qualified than you. So just go out there and do that.
Yeah, amazing. What would you say is, I guess you've mentioned a couple there already, but would you say there's one underlying lesson that you've learned throughout this journey that's really stuck with you?
100%. My personal health is detrimental to the health of my business in terms of client success, financial health. all these others, customer journey, etc. When I was going through burnout, my business was still thriving, but I felt so unhappy that it was reflecting in sort of my day's work. I was working, 8 to 15 hours a day, and thinking and assuming that hours of work meant good work and productivity, rather than perhaps whilst I was in Asia, where I'd done a lot of work on myself internally, I was doing about 4 to 6 hours a day, sometimes less, and achieving so much more for our business growth, business development. And it's quite interesting to look at over half the time, yet so much more productive and efficient for the future of the business. So yeah, I think at the moment my calendar is gym in the morning. I go for a walk at 1 p.m. every day. I make sure that I have a walk at 5 p.m. I don't limit myself to switch off at 5 p.m. Last night I worked till 10 o'clock at night because I had hyper focus. But making sure you listen to your body in times where you're tired, you're exhausted, you're unhappy. You need to put yourself first and find a hobby outside of your job as well.
Yeah, I think physical health is super important. I also believe mental health is probably something that people need to focus more on. I think I saw a post from you actually talking about that. Is there anything you'd want to share about mental health, or any advice you want to give anyone who should be thinking about that more?
Of course. So for the record, what Leighton's talking about is I packed up in January and booked a one-way ticket to Asia and traveled countries in Asia for 4 months, similar to what Leighton's doing now. He's currently in Phuket, but I was smiling on my Zoom calls. I was posting on LinkedIn daily. The business was going really well, but I was actually on the verge of depression. And looking back, it does make me quite sad, because I wish that I did something about this earlier. And I'm glad that I did take the action there. But I think a couple of things would be to talk to people. There are a lot of people in the business space on LinkedIn, other social media circles, even in-person networking events. There are people who are experiencing the exact same things as you, no matter where you are in your journey, and whether you're just starting to leave your job or you're, a good few years in your freelancing journey. There's always going to be someone who's experienced what you have, or they're experiencing it too. And being able to talk to other people who are experiencing that have really helped me, and having an inner circle of people to lean on, because I don't want to plaster all over my social channels that, I only had 4 hours sleep last night and I feel like I feel terrible today. But having an inner circle to lean on really helped me. I think it's important to recognize that everyone is feeling like that at times. Social media really paints a highlight reel of everyone achieving 6 figures, everyone closing every sale. They're posting on LinkedIn, they're doing amazing, but there are days that they feel pretty rough, and we're normal human beings. So don't let social media portray a fallacy of that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think it's really important. And I've found that as I've talked about my mental health more, it's allowed others to open up as well. And as you said, speaking to someone or opening up to someone or asking for help is so important. And I think sometimes that's just the first step that you need to help you get you over that hump, and then get you through the other side, right? So yeah, I think that's really beneficial.
100%. And sometimes I have felt weird talking about it on social media, but I very much try to take the narrative of this happened and I overcame it through this, and now I feel like this, because it means that I can demonstrate some sort of emotional connection with people in my community, and if they're feeling like that right now, they can realize, okay, perhaps I go down a similar route to what Izzy did, and really focus on my mental health, invest in therapy, talk to people in my inner circle. If I were to post about it whilst I was going through it, I feel like it would partially damage my reputation, because you come across as someone who perhaps isn't reliable to work with, or a little bit of a worrying investment. Obviously, we all have mental health at the end of the day, and we all have our own mental struggles, regardless of how tough. But displaying that on social media, there is definitely complications, and you do need to be sensitive with what you upload.
Yeah, and I like what you said about having your inner circle or someone that's
Mm,
close to you, whether it's a friend or family, or even speaking to a therapist, right? It doesn't have to be publicized on
definitely.
all your channels. Um, but yeah, no, that's great. I was going to ask you before we finish up, if we could jump back in time a little bit, let's say to when you were still working in your job, what advice would you give your younger self?
Quit. No, I'm joking. Well, actually, yes, please. I'd probably say to have left earlier. The workplace that I was at, I was getting bullied, and I think this very much impacted the confidence that I had to rebuild for myself, and perhaps to not let my age define me. I was the youngest team member by about 10 years when I worked at this workplace, and coming out of the job and starting my own business, I was under the impression that my age meant I was immature, I wasn't experienced enough, which obviously meant that I couldn't charge a great deal more for my services. There are a lot of insecurities around my age, and 2 years later, I finally come to a conclusion that my age doesn't define who should work with me or how much I should sell my services for, because the creative outlook that we hold and the skills that we're able to offer for our clients far outweigh whether I'm a 42-year-old or a 22-year-old. So very much instilling beliefs and removing limiting beliefs from my mindset really would have helped in the beginning, and probably had a snowball effect to where I am today.
Yeah, great advice. I think I've had a couple of conversations very recently, actually, and the topic is around workplace culture. And it seems very easy for people to get manipulated into certain situations or mindsets and feeling a little bit stuck and trapped and acting in a certain way while you're in that job. So yeah, telling yourself to leave sooner, I think sometimes it's quite difficult to just do
It
that.
is definitely. I again agree the age thing definitely came into it, and I think a lot of workplaces need a great deal more of education regarding perhaps people with learning difficulties, or perhaps they're neurodivergent, these sort of things. Everyone has different ways of communication, and the way that I was treated was very much a one size fits all approach to every single worker. And I think that my boss and the supervisors around in our office didn't recognize that my learning was through talking to other people, through interacting, and instead of telling someone off for being away from their desk and really working with another person, it really should be encouraged, because that might be someone's particular skill set. So I think the office environment in today's world has a long way to go. There needs to be a great deal more of education on how humans interact with each other and how we perform best, because perhaps this was just my experience, but I didn't feel like that was tended to.
Yeah, no, I think there's obviously some companies that are getting better at it, but as you say, there's always more that can be done, and giving more opportunities for people that learn in different ways.
Definitely. And I think now that I'm building my own team, I've been very aware of these different ways of people working. There's an interesting theory or method called disc profiling, where you can learn how other people react. And actually, we're looking at incorporating it into our clients, because the way you communicate with your clients needs to be different. Everyone is different in their cultures and beliefs and values. And if you have a quick 15-minute call or an hour and 15-minute call, clients can be very, very reactive in how they speak to you.
Yeah, amazing. Izzy, thanks so much for coming on today. So much wisdom, so much information. Where can people find you online?
So at the moment, I'm only mainly on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is Izzy Prior. I do have an Instagram account, which is more public, called Izzy Prior Talks, and a Twitter profile called that as well. But mainly on LinkedIn, and that's where I post numerous times a week.
Great. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Leighton. Really enjoyed that. Thank you.
And there we have it. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. One of the biggest takeaways for me was around it not mattering how old you are. And it doesn't matter how much experience you've got either. If you've got an idea, if you've got a passion, if you've got a purpose, or a slight direction, start taking those steps, break through the fear and do it. And it doesn't matter about the adversity of the people around you. It's your life and you need to do what you need to do to live it to the maximum. Thank you so much for listening. If you found value, make sure that you share this on your social media, and we'll be back same time next week.